Welcome to the Australian Business Executive Podcast, where we speak with Australia's most influential industry professionals on the business and economic development issues taking place across the country. You can stay up to date with all our content, including our magazines, podcasts and videos by visiting www.theabe.com.au and clicking on subscribe.
Today's guest is Carl Brown, Managing Director of Rockhampton, Queensland-based architectural firm Beat Architects. With a passion for fine arts and photography, Carl was drawn to architecture. This is not surprising given his father was a quantity surveyor and grandfather an architect and quantity surveyor as well. Architectural studies were completed at Brisbane QUT in the 80s. In 1990, Carl moved to central Queensland to escape the pressures of big city living and soon set up Beat Architects in Rockhampton, which grew to a 20-person practice by 2008. With a reputation of quality design and documentation, Beat specialised in residential, education, commercial, heritage, civic, and medical projects, providing interior design, architectural and project management services. That's quite a mouthful, Carl. It's good to have you with us today.
Yes, thanks very much for having me.
So the intro gives us a pretty good overview, but do you want to tell us a little bit more about Beat Architects and your company background?
Yes, certainly. In 1991, that's when I commenced the practice as Carl Brown Architects, and we had a small staff of 3, and we just grew gradually, the best way to do it, to then create Beat Architects in 2010. And this is when we purchased an existing firm in Rockhampton, a chap who was retiring, and Tropical Architects. Hence, it was Brown Evans and Architects. We merged with Tropical to form Beat Architects.
Okay. So what has that done for you guys in terms of, improving your company footprint?
Yeah, well, it's allowed us to do larger projects, and rather than just handling the smaller things, it's given us a lot more capacity. At that time, too, we were able to have a number of offices in the central Queensland region and around that time. So we were able to service, clients where they were in town rather than travelling an hour or two to visit us as well. So that extra size in practice helped us to do that. We were also, it gave us a good consistency and quality in the regions. People like dealing with the same people every time. And our practice, I guess one of the things that we're pleased to be able to offer is most of our staff have been here 10, 20 years. So clients who haven't been for a while come back and they see the same staff. And that gives them a comfortable reassurance in working with us. So that's helped a lot.
And for a regional practice, you guys are considered rather large and significant for the area, are you not?
Yeah, we were. We have shrunk down a bit now. We were actually the largest practice outside of Brisbane in number sizes. There's 2 ways to gauge that. It's turnover and also in staff size. So in staff size we were. Since the GFC happened and things in central Queensland got a bit quieter with the coal quietening down, we made the decision to reduce the office, and something that no doubt we'll talk a little bit about later is come to a core staff and work with contract staff, which was more also addressing what's happening in the whole business environment in Australia at the moment. So we're more of a medium-sized practice at the moment.
Okay. And so with your head office based in Rocky then, how far or how distance-wise can you take on projects from your office? Are you able to work nationally? Yeah,
that's the beauty of the state we're in at the moment with the internet. We can work nationwide. We do actually have jobs down in Adelaide, but our core work area would be central Queensland from, say, Townsville down to Brisbane, but mostly centred around here and out west is our core work. But we can work all over Australia now.
Okay. During the introduction, you talked about a number of key industry sectors that you specialize in, but there's quite a few there. How did you decide on these, and are you guys known for one or two industry segments where you tend to do more of your work?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with the regional practice. Where we differ from big city practices is we have to be quite experienced in a number of areas. So, for instance, it's simply because we are regional. There's not a big broad base of specialist firms who say just do hospitals and just do education. You wouldn't survive because there's not enough work in the area for such a single specialist. However, we still require the specialist experience to do the jobs, no matter how big or small they are. So one thing we find in our practice is we've got an architect here who does essentially nothing but education and specialises in that. And then another one who does mainly medical work, and another who does heritage work and commercial work. So, and myself, where I have a good experience base in most of those areas, because we all came out of large offices at some stage, whether it be in London, Brisbane or Sydney, that did specialise in certain areas. So we came to the regions with specialisation, and could offer that locally. But it is a key thing that we need to have in the areas, and it does sound a lot, but we do actually have those specialties here.
Yeah. Okay. So are there particular segments that are growing, and I mean that more just as a trend, because with the growing population, with other organizations that we've spoken to within the same space, they continuously talk about aged care as a big thing. But because you guys are based in central Queensland, are there particular industries or growth patterns that you're seeing up there?
Education is the primary growth corridor for architects and other industries as well, but all relating to education is the primary one in the regions. Aged care tends to be growing as well. However, most often than not, architects are engaged where the client is located. So a lot of those aged care projects, say with the Salvation Army, the Baptist Uniting Church, or the Blue Care, their head offices are in Brisbane. So they tend to appoint all their professionals in the Brisbane office. So even though they'll do it all regionally, we tend not to see it because they tend to de-regionalise, they centralise their work base. This is one of the problems that we have here, and that's what happens. On the other hand, though, a growing industry too is related to aged care is medical. So whereas the large city firms might be doing multi-million-dollar hospital work, they will engage with the local architects or ourselves to do the smaller medical projects. So like a birthing suite or a new extension to, one of the original buildings, or a day surgery. They will engage with us locally because we do have the experience to do that. So we find for ourselves that's where our core work is and where we tend to see it growing. But education, medical, aged care, I would agree that is something that's always going to be with us and growing.
Before, when we had agreed to do this piece for you for this edition, I remember us talking about that, of how it's a bit more difficult for you guys as a regional practice, because I believe you were mentioning councils and other government organizations will tend to go to city-based or firms with a bit of a larger profile. Why do you think that is, when they really should be supporting the local economy? Yeah,
I actually think it's to coin an old phrase, it's a bit of the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. There seems to be a misconception that the best services come from the big cities, which ironically means, so someone in Rockhampton will be going, we have to go to Brisbane to get this work done if we want to get it done well. And then somebody in Brisbane will be saying, well, we really should be going to Sydney to get this work done because, they're obviously better. It's very interesting, and those same sort of people will say, but we're very good, and we're where we are. So it's something that we've identified and that we have to address, and it is very difficult to change those in charge their misconceptions. It's preconceived, so it's very hard to deal with. And I guess the only way to do it is it's a gradual process. We just do the work we can and do the absolute best, and the results and references will be enough to essentially say you're a success or not. And we're finding that's the best way to solve it. So it's a long-term approach, and continually talking and engaging with those same folk as well. But yeah, we're working on that.
For many people like myself who don't actually work within the industry, it's hard to truly understand how architecture fits into a building. When there's a piece of new construction or refurbishment that's being undertaken and you guys get involved, how do you fit in? What problems are you really solving? Right.
The main things that architects offer over any other, and we're talking against, say, building designers, which is a common phrase that you'll hear more and more, is that we offer design. We are design specialists. It's something that we're trained in and that we work on continually to develop. And what that means is that we can offer our clients ways to save money, to make the space more efficient, say reduce the footprint, but not lose any floor area. It might sound ironic, but as an example, we were commissioned by a national building firm that has their own set of house plans, and they said to us, "We want you to make our houses bigger, but don't add any floor area to them." Now that might sound a bit of a contradiction in terms, but it is actually possible. So we reviewed the plans, and simply by removing awkward spaces, relocating where doorways are, moving the spaces around so they have better relationships, we actually can increase the floor area of a room by maybe a square metre or two and take it away from a wasted portion of a corridor or something like that. So architects are known as very good lateral thinkers. So we try to think outside the box and go, well, how can we approach a solution differently? The other side of it is adding value to a home or any building. It's a difficult one, but it's sort of like saying, hey, we want $1 million building to look like a $2 million building. So that's what the architects are adding to, is making the space not only enjoyable to live in and work in, but also to look great as well. So a good architect should be doing that and adding that value to every project.
So does that mean, are you brought in on a lot of new or greenfields projects then, or is there a lot of refurbishment and upgrade type work that you would find yourself involved in as well?
Definitely. Actually, at the moment, over the last probably 3 years in the regions, certainly the refurbishment work has been the primary source of income. Where governments and other clients haven't had the money to build new buildings, they've said, well, how can we improve these spaces and what we've got? So the majority of our work is exactly doing that, keeping current buildings more valuable and extending their life. It is something that I think is a primary way to reduce the outlay and increase the longevity and the value of the buildings. Definitely.
Okay. There are a number of architecture firms across the country. What do you think makes Beat Architects different to other practices that exist?
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting one. That's something I've thought about myself as well. And very briefly, just as in a few points, we believe where we can add value and have an advantage over others is we employ, as I mentioned earlier, only senior experienced people, and qualified architects, designers, interior designers, whereas a lot of big city firms rely on students because they're working in a capital city where they have students, so they'll get a job and they can hand it off to a lesser qualified and paid staff member to essentially improve their bottom line, whereas our office only offers senior staff. So clients know that they are getting top of the line for a similar fee. That's certainly something that we class as an advantage here. We also have a very broad range of experience, which actually adds to any client's project, whether it's related to that particular field or not. They're bringing in experience from a wide range of projects will benefit the client. And essentially we also know the region really well. We know the climate, the people, and more importantly, we know the planners, the council, the political state of the town, and that comes in very, very handy when you're trying to get buildings approved or difficult projects, planning approval obtained where you might not otherwise. So the personal relationships certainly do help.
Talking about your connections to the area, are there a few projects that you'd like to discuss or that you've received recognition for?
Yeah, certainly. We've really had the privilege of doing a couple of what we would consider higher profile projects in the area, and some that we're quite proud of. One of the few most recent have been an aged care facility the Rainbow Valley Childcare Centre in Gladstone. We were asked to do an extension to their existing facility, which we had previously designed for high school out-of-school hours care, and they wanted a space that was engaging, artistic, and creative. They didn't just want a building. They wanted something that the kids and the students were excited to go to, and had a real design flair to it. So that was exciting to do, and we've got details, obviously, on our website too of that. The Yeppoon Town Hall was another exciting project that we did out at Yeppoon for the Rocky City Council at the time. The old hall was very tired from the 60s, and it was virtually 90% demolished and part of it retained, and we built a new state-of-the-art facility with a 300-seat auditorium, function rooms and offices and such. They wanted a building that looked more like something you would see, going to a larger city, say on the Sunshine Coast or the Brisbane. They wanted to bring the town into the 21st century. So that's two of our most recent projects. I can discuss more if you wish, but I don't know if that's enough at this stage.
No, that's all right. If there's another one, you're more than welcome to.
Okay. Another one that we've done is the Rockhampton Business Hub. So this is only this year. The old Customs House, which is a very well-known heritage building in Rockhampton on the river. The Rocky City Council wanted to develop a place for emerging businesses, and we were commissioned to turn this basement area into an innovative design centre that was very interactive and also offering personal spaces where people could do start-up businesses. We wanted to retain we had to retain the heritage features and the real ambience of the building, but create a modern office atmosphere. That was one that's just been recently finished and is achieving good success at the moment. Okay. So that was another project there.
Again, before the podcast, we'd previously been discussing some of the growing issues surrounding outsourcing architectural work overseas and having the quality of the product begin to diminish because of cost cutting. Do you want to put that in perspective for people like myself who aren't in the industry?
Certainly, yeah. One of my concerns in the industry, and this comes about from looking where is our profession and practice going in the future. Where will we be in 10 years? We've noticed a growing trend, particularly with a lot of the larger Brisbane firms, that they are outsourcing and have drafting done overseas in various countries, Malaysia, Philippines, India. It doesn't really matter. It's a global world now. And they're getting this labour at a very, very cheap rate, like $5 a day instead of $50 a day, sort of, or $500 a day, whatever the staff member be. So we were looking, well, how can we compete against firms doing this, and how can we keep the work local and still remain financially viable in the future? So we realised, we do have to offer a more personalised service. But also we had to look at how we ran our offices, and this is something I mentioned earlier on as well. So rather than having an office of 20 now, we have an office of 10, and we outsource work, but not overseas, but to local contractors. And when I say local, they could be Rockhampton, Bundaberg, Emerald, in the area. So they're still Australians, and we still work closely with them. But we're finding that to combat and to stay relevant, we're tending to have to work more, if you like, at home or in smaller spaces rather than having an office, which we still do. Because my concern is that in the near future, medium-sized practices like ours won't exist. They'll either be the work from home architect, or they'll be the very large firms in the city. So this is why we're not the only ones. We do know a number of firms that are moving towards this model of having a smaller office, a smaller base, in working with contractors. It is difficult at times, but it seems it's an unstoppable force as far as obtaining overseas work. I mean, we all see how fast industry is leaving Australia and just moving overseas. But I still want to keep it here. And I think there is a way, and it's this model that we're now trialling at our practice, where we still have a good base here, but we do also get work done in contract rather than increasing the office size. Okay.
Before we finish up today, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or discuss?
Not in particular. Maybe just one, is that I find there is also an issue in Australia, and I don't think it's just limited to architecture, is that the best projects or the best architects seem to be the ones that are the cheapest. In other words, how do you engage your architect? Most people go, well, I went for the cheapest one. We're trying to encourage folk and our clients by saying a bit more like the American model, which is look at the quality, look at what you're getting. And our focus is a reasonable price for a very high quality of service. So that's another thing that I feel quite passionate about, is to just encourage our future clients and anyone looking for work, is look at what the architect can do. How good is their work? How good is their referees? And because you do want a quality service, because as they say, in the end of the day, that's what you're going to remember, and it's not the price.
Excellent. Carl, it's been great having you joining us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
This has been a production of the Australian Business Executive, a division of Romulus Rising Proprietary Limited. All rights reserved. You can stay up to date with the Australian Business Executive, including our magazines, podcasts and videos, by visiting www.theabe.com.au and clicking on subscribe.